Welcome back, everyone, to this Week 11 edition of Bruce Monnin's Computer Points Podcast. I am Bruce Monnin, your host, recording from our studio in Minster, Ohio, home of the Division III state champion in girls cross country, the Minster Wildcats.
Ooh.
4 years straight now on those state titles, 17 total. I'm waiting for competitive balance to hit cross country and them to move Minster up a division or two.
Just to clarify, 17 total state titles for the cross-country teams?
Yes.
All right, cool.
Also checking in from the greater Cincinnati area, home of the 5-3 Cincinnati Bearcats, or if you prefer college basketball, the 1-0 Cincinnati Bearcats. We have our co-host, executive producer, and chief researcher, Rebekah Monnin.
Always happy to be here. For anyone following UC Bearcat basketball, if you go to the game next Friday, you might see me in the stands. They tapped the alumni band to play the pep band bit, so I need to figure out how to play my saxophone again. I don't actually know who they play, or really what time it is. I just know that I need to be there. Nichols State University from Thibodaux, Louisiana.
No doubt making their round trip, collecting large paychecks from various schools as they play basketball.
Yeah, I would guess. The band informal night. So they're all out. The undergraduates are out having a nice dinner and partying. And the alumni get to come in and play some pep tunes that we haven't played in 6 to 10 years. Should be a blast.
And while we all can contemplate the thought of Rebekah playing incredibly off-tune music next week Friday at the basketball game.
Off-tune?
Well, I'm sure not all the alumni has kept up as well as you have.
I haven't kept up, but I'm not going to be bad to listen to. I just might give out halfway through.
Well, if nothing else, you can just cheer loudly, right?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Also joining us this week, we have Colin Foster, formerly full-time sports writer for the Celina Daily Standard. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you. I think this is my second time ever, right?
I believe it is, yes.
I'm honored again.
Oh, well, thank you. Let us know what you're working on these days.
I'm actually a full-time employee at Crown, and I still write on the side. So I'm typically doing about 2 to 3 games a week. And also, as you're seeing with this podcast now, you're seeing that I am a father of a 2-year-old girl who's kind of crazy, and she'll probably make an appearance before this is over.
As I like to say, I basically have blocked out the first 5 years of my kids' lives. I was so busy and tired, so.
He's learning what 2-year-olds are like now with a grandchild.
Yes, it's. I don't remember any of this at all. So.
Only a little bit concerning.
So, Colin, what I'm more interested in, you can tell us back in the old days, what was a typical week like when you were a full-time, highly compensated sports writer?
Typically, I mean, you had to be on guard. I mean, pretty much the whole week because, anything could happen. But you typically start on a Sunday. We would basically be second shift, and we'd work from about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 11:30, 1 o'clock, depending on the night. So yeah, it's like polar opposite of what I do now. You miss some things about second shift, but you also don't because you miss a lot with second shift. So, but yeah, it was a lot of game coverage. So typically we'd go to, 4 games a week, 5 games a week. It's depending on the week. Had a lot of good memories from that time. I think I started in 2014, and when did I officially stop? Like 2020. I was actually just thinking about this right before you called. Some of the better games I've ever covered, and I would say the Minster 2014 state championship game against Kirtland, and then I would also say the Marion local state final. What year would that have been? The basketball state final.
Why, you've got me on that one.
But yeah, I would say those are probably the 2 of the best games I've ever covered.
I have a tendency to go into something of a hibernation during basketball season after the football season's over. So I don't follow a whole lot of the winter sports, to be honest.
Don't you do Cincinnati Bearcat basketball?
Well, yeah, but I can do that from my couch.
That's actually, yeah, it's pretty nice.
He doesn't attend a lot of the winter sports. I think it's the bigger one.
But they charge a lot of money down there, and I'd have to get the car and go 2 hours each way. And I can't drive myself, so I have to get someone to drive me 2 hours each way. And it just doesn't happen.
Cold weather, I mean, makes me want to sit on my couch too. I get it.
So now that we have Colin here, we are going to look at the second round playoff matchups and give a brief overview of what Drew Pasteur's Fantastic 50 computer predicts will be the outcomes of these games. We are going to start, I would say as always, but that's not quite true, is it, Rebekah? As usual, we are starting with Division 1, Region 1, and we have lost our team here. Number 10 seeded Findlay played 5-5 Lakewood St. Edward last week. Computer said Findlay was a 37-point underdog, and they lost 48-0. Not a good night for Findlay.
They don't have Big Ben anymore.
No, they do not. And
with
that loss, we are now done with Division 1, Region 1 for the season. I know in our my notes you sent last week, Rebekah, I noticed Van had said Findlay was going to be fired up for that first round playoff win, but they had a 4-draw. Lakewood St. Edward was not going to be a team to beat in the playoffs. So poor luck for Findlay there. In Division 2, Region 8, unfortunately, all 3 of our teams who made the playoffs lost in the first round last week.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was not good.
This is setting up a bad trend here, Dad.
It gets better. Don't worry. We'll start with Lima Senior at 9-1 was the 9 seed, and they went on the road to Vandalia Butler. The computers predicted Lima Senior would be an 11-point underdog. They actually lost 31-0 after a year of just putting up all kinds of offense against the Toledo City League. When the playoffs hit, the offense wasn't going anywhere. The competition got a little bit tougher.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard anything about the quarterback. That was news to me. It seemed like he had some really, really big numbers that stood out, and I was actually really excited to maybe get a chance to see him play. Unfortunately, they lost last week.
Wait, Colin, who is that we hear in the background every now and then?
That would be the crazy daughter, Charlotte, that I alluded to in the beginning there. I think she's coming down to get her Play-Doh and cause chaos, apparently.
Our second team in this region was also an underdog. The 11 seed Troy was a 22-point underdog against 8-2 Harrison. Troy lost 43-7, so a tough night for Troy also.
Tough night for Troy. Just kind of coming from down that way. I've seen their playoff trajectory over the last 10, 20 years, and it seems like they always kind of encounter that Cincinnati area team gives them problems.
Our final team here, the lowest of our 3 seeds, the 14th seeded Sydney squad. They were the largest underdog of the 3, a 25-point underdog against 9-1 Xenia. And they only lost by 17, 31-14. So they put up the best effort of the 3 in Region 8 last week. Moving on to more positive news. In Division 3, Region 10, we had the 6 seed. 7-4 Defiance will be playing the 3 seed, 9-2 Cleveland Benedictine this week. Last week, Defiance was a 23-point favorite over Bowling Green, and they won 38-0. Put the running clock on.
Nice.
Big win by Defiance.
Wow. That is a big win. That's all the years I covered up this way. I can't remember Defiance doing much in football, and it's good to see. It's really good to see.
They've been a fun team to follow the last couple of years, that's for sure. You're never quite sure what you're going to get with Defiance, but it's usually interesting.
Baseball is always good.
Yes, it is. The computer says Defiance is a 27-point underdog this week, however, to Cleveland Benedictine.
Computer might know something that I don't know about Cleveland Benedictine. I don't know much about Cleveland Benedictine.
Well, Benedictine had a comfortable 35-7 win over 4-6 Tiffin Columbian last week, so they had a rather easy start to their playoff run. That's the best I know about Cleveland Benedictine myself. So other than private school in Cleveland, it's usually St. Ignatius, St. Ed, or Benedictine. They're all usually pretty good.
I would bet that they can probably beat the Browns.
Oh boy.
All those Browns gave everyone a week of hope there, didn't they? And then they took it away this week.
Yep, for sure.
The Benedictine mascot is the Bengals. So with the
Yes,
way
they
the Browns
are.
and Bengals have been playing recently, they may not be able to beat the Browns.
Well, I think the Bengals are coming on, actually.
Yeah, but
They had
they tend to trip up whenever it's the Browns-Bengals game.
Well, it
I
does
feel
happen
like
sometimes.
they've shown glimpses throughout the year. They just haven't gotten a lot of big wins. That Eagles loss was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was. Yeah.
Bring it back to high school, maybe a little bit there, Dad.
All right, we'll do that. Before we move on, we're going to hit our scores of the week.
Scores of the week.
And in keeping to the orders from the executive producer, we have exactly 2 scores of the week this week.
Excellent. Keep it competitive.
We'll start with one that's not local. Dublin Kaufman 49, Galloway Westland 42. This was a win for the 14 seed, who reached the playoffs with a 2-8 record. But they get in because pretty much everyone in Division 1 gets into the playoffs.
How many schools is D1? Is it 30, 32, something like that?
Most regions have 17 or 18 teams, and the top 16 get into playoffs. But what was exciting here is the number 4 team gets a win. They were almost the 5-point underdog in that game. This week, they are only a 1-point underdog as they play the 6th seed, 7-4 Lebanon. So we could have the 2-8 14 seed winning 2 playoff games.
I will say 5 points is not a ton to be underdogged by. So the computer must have liked them a bit too.
And yeah, I would say, Bruce, looking at those computer points breakdowns and like what the projections were last week, like that was a lot of those are pretty spot on. I don't.
Yes, they were.
What was the percentage breakdown last week? Would they end up winning?
Oh, I haven't even looked. It's usually about this time of year between 80-85% as far as getting the game right.
Wow. I think there's some surefire picks this week.
Oh, yes, there are. There were a lot of them last week. There's still a few yet this week. Our second score of the week is more local. St. Mary's 28, Miami Trace 24. We kind of poo-pooed Miami Trace last week, said St. Mary's had the tougher schedule. They probably weren't going to be ready for what was coming. Miami Trace was very much ready for what was coming in that game. But I think the game can be summed up by the fact that St. Mary's, who basically runs the ball almost every play, needed a 41-yard touchdown pass on 4th down and 20 with 26 seconds left in the game to get the win.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Big play.
When I got done writing my story, I was at Bremen and St. Henry last week. I was just checking scores, saw that. So I went on like the Rider Nation station page and just fast forwarded to the end and watched it, and it was unbelievable. Like if they got that in their back pocket, that's pretty dangerous. Because I know I went to a game this year. They averaged, I think, 9.5 yards a carry and did not throw the ball the entire time. I couldn't believe when the kid just came out and slang it 41 yards right to the end zone. It was amazing. Never seen it.
So you're saying this wasn't a wounded duck that just happened to be caught. This was a nice pass, you're saying.
They did like a shotgun. I'm trying to remember the formation they did. I don't know the exact name of it, but they had like 3 people on the line. The rest were like flanked out left. And they did a passing play like that. It looked like they had practiced it.
We would hope so, but yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I could tell a story here. I don't know if this is quite true or not, but way back in 1988, our Minster Wildcats were a wishbone running pretty much every play team, and they ran up against Archbold in the playoffs, and they couldn't run the ball. And I'm pretty sure they were making up pass plays on the sideline and then teaching it to the players between series so that they could come up, because they had not thrown passes all year long. And that's what the plays looked like, too. It's like, well, you run that way, and we'll try to get it to you. That didn't work real well either. But
it'll be interesting to see what St. Mary's does this week. That should be a good game.
That is true. Speaking of which, we're moving on to Division 3, Region 12 at the moment. There seems to be a reason why we put the scores of the week where we do all the time, Rebekah.
Always there.
We'll start with we lost 2 of our 4 teams. Our 5th seed, 8-2 Bell Fountain, was upset by the 12 seed, 5-5 Dayton Chaminade Julienne. The computer had Bell Fountain as an 18-point favorite. I am told they had 3 players that had been big for them through the year out for the game, which could have contributed something to it. It wasn't injuries either, I don't think. I think one of them.
I did read it actually right before I got on this podcast that their best receiver was sitting out for disciplinary reasons. So,
yep.
And I know, I mean, you got St. Clair, but I watched. I'm assuming this guy was the one playing against Coldwater last year too, and those guys were pretty freaking good. So it would make an impact.
Yep. Well, Bell Fountain out. All the Ohio State fans will have to go find another Ohio State recruit to watch in their game this week. Next team that we lost was 6-4 Celina. They were on the road at the 6th seed, 8-2 Cincinnati Archbishop McNicholas. The computer said Celina was a 14-point underdog. They lost by a lot more than that, 35-3.
Yeah, and I was at their game the week before that against Wapak, and they looked good. Quite honestly, they should have won that game, in my opinion. It reminded me a lot of the Ohio State-Nebraska game because I thought Nebraska outplayed Ohio State, and it kind of reminded me of that. But yeah, I think Cincinnati area schools, they're good. Like kind of like I talked about with Troy. You see some pretty good schools down that way. So,
as we like to say on this podcast, especially in Division 1 and 2, we're not as quite so sure in Division 3 and 4 about the Cincinnati area schools, and we don't fear them at all in Divisions 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah. I think we'll talk a little bit more about those teams later, probably.
Yes, we will.
Maybe a handful of them.
The top seed in this region, undefeated 11-0 Tip City Tippecanoe, is hosting the 8th seed 9-2 St. Mary's. Last week, Tippecanoe, Tip City, was a 36-point favorite over Oxford Talawanda, and they won 49-7. They lived up to their pregame billing. We already mentioned St. Mary's. They were actually a 33-point favorite over Miami Trace, according to the computers, and needed that pass to pull it out at the end. Now, of course, the computers look at both of those and says, we'll take Tip City by 11 points over St. Mary's in this week's game.
This is one of those games that I don't think Tip's going to see that style too often. And like we kind of talked about with St. Mary's winning that game last week, I don't think it was pretty at all. But the fact that they have the pass game maybe in their back pocket in one of those close situations, I think that could be a big thing. Tip is one of those programs, though. They got some athletes, and I actually did look at their schedule right before I got on tonight, and I covered some of those teams, like the Troy teams, kind of the G-Walk before it disbanded, and they had some decent teams down that way. So that should be a good game. Both of those teams are traditional powers. We'll see what happens, but St. Mary's has got to be feeling pretty decent going into this, in my opinion. But I'm also a Rough Rider now, so take that for what it's worth. I actually did, like I said, I reached out to my friend down from Tip, and he says Tip's quarterback is a stud. He thinks they'll win. So take that for what it's worth. Brandon Arts,
all right,
in Tip City, thinks they're going to win.
All right. And my only thought is back to your Ohio State-Nebraska thing before. St. Mary's coming off of that game where obviously I'm sure the team and the coaches are not pleased with most of how that game went other than the last play or so. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage for them? Do they come out on fire this week afterwards? Or are they vulnerable?
Could be.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. I think they're also playing with really nothing to lose this week. I mean, I don't think people would pick them in this game. So we'll see.
Like usual, it'll probably come down to if St. Mary's can get those 5-6 yards of running play, right?
Yep.
And finally in this region, we have the 2 seed undefeated Wapakoneta hosting the 10 seed 7-4 Wilmington. Wapak was the 36-point favorite over Franklin, and they won 48-7. So last week went as expected for Wapakoneta. The computer says Wapakoneta is a 27-point favorite again this week. Now, I did my looking as usual. I was rather disappointed this week. I couldn't find many common opponents for a lot of these matchups. But I did notice Wilmington lost in week 2 to that Miami Trace team that St. Mary's defeated last week. So that makes me lean a little more Wapakoneta myself there.
Yeah, I'd side with Wapak too. I'm pretty sold on Wapak. I had heard maybe in that game with Celina they had some injuries to players. Maybe not their best showing, but overall body of work, they've been pretty solid from start to finish this week. And it would be fun to see them and St. Mary's hook up again. I'd be a big fan of that.
Would be. I wonder where they would play that game. Not at Wapak or St. Mary's, obviously.
Yeah. Where would they play that? Sydney?
Maybe Sydney, yeah.
Lima?
By the way,
that wouldn't be bad.
Lima might work.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I never put too much faith, if I can help it, in Week 10 games. You never know who's playing for their playoff life and who's kind of taking the week off to get ready for the playoffs.
Definitely.
So always beware Week 10 results, especially nowadays when 16 teams get into playoffs and instead of the 8, where you had to take every game and work them hard. So Division 4, Region 14. We're going to start with, we had 3-7 Elida got into the playoffs as a 15 seed. They were a 33-point underdog to undefeated Shelby, and they lost 49-21. So it was pretty exciting that they got into the playoffs. They weren't really expected to win. It's kind of tough getting in and running into an undefeated team right out of the chute. So
Shelby's had some really good teams in recent years. I remember looking at a highlight reel of a bunch of their players before they played St. Mary's maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and they had some guys that can play. Some dudes, as Mr. Stokes and Minster would call
them. Yes. Rebekah, you'd probably be happy. You probably remember this. At Shelby, they are the Whippets.
Right. The Whippets. We love a little dog mascot.
Always a fun thing.
Not the most intimidating thing to run out onto the field, but always entertaining.
I'm just a fan of creative mascots, and that's a good one.
I am as well. It sure beats another tiger or wildcat.
Bulldog.
3 Bulldogs in the WBL, the same conference.
Too many. There's a lot of different dog breeds, I'm just saying.
Love to see a poodle or a terrier.
You can put like a mighty in front of poodle. Maybe
mighty poodle.
The Mighty Poodles. I like that.
Oh, shoot.
Okay, we do have 2 games in this region this week. The 10 seed, Ottawa Glandorf, now 6-5, go on the road to play the number 2 seed, those undefeated Shelby Whippets. So Shelby got done with one WBL team, on to the next. The computer said Ottawa Glandorf was a 6-point favorite last week over Galleon, and they won exactly 6 points, 13-7. That's not good news for Ottawa Glandorf, because this week the computer says they are a 22-point underdog to Shelby.
Think the Whippets are going to keep steamrolling?
Whippets are saying, just give me another WBL team, right?
Hey, OG has they've surprised a little bit in my eyes this year. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm kind of siding with Shelby. If I were a betting man, I'd do that one.
Our final game in this region, Napoleon is still alive. The 13 seed is now 6-5. They travel to the 5 seed, 7-4 Bay Village Bay.
Another great name.
You don't think they need more bays in the name?
I think a couple more couldn't hurt. Like some old bay seasoning as their mascot or something.
I was thinking, you think they're the Leaves?
Oh, that's fantastic. I hope so.
They're the Rockets.
Another overused mascot for the area.
Yes. The computer said that last week Napoleon was a 5-point favorite over Lorraine Clearview. Napoleon won 49-0. Talk about beating the spread.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
This week, computer says Napoleon is an 8-point favorite over the Rockets of Bay Village Bay. Bay had something of an easy 41-14 win over Lodi Cloverleaf last week. Bay has lost 2 games to teams with losing records this season and defeated just 1 team with a winning record. So
I'll be honest, I haven't heard of some of these schools on their schedules.
It's usually the Cleveland, Lake Erie border towns or the Pennsylvania border towns that give us some confusion.
And I always thought I had a
What
good
happened?
grasp on like Cleveland area schools, but I don't.
Bay Village is right up on the lake, kind of near Sandusky.
What you tend to get up there is you get, with Cleveland being the big city, the region doesn't go very far. And the Northwest region, the boundary tends to float all the way over towards the Cleveland border there. Sometimes picks up a team or two from out that way. You said Bay's only by Sandusky, though, so not that bad.
I was wrong. It's closer to Cleveland than Sandusky, but it's on the western side
okay.
of Cleveland.
Eastern side.
All right. Well, sounds like good news for our friends from Napoleon. We'll have to see how that works out, other than, long bus ride all the way over to Cleveland, right?
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, Division 4, Region 16. We have another region where we have been wiped out.
Ooh.
All we had
this is
was an 11.
Win them all. Can't win them all.
Maybe we're a bad luck charm for the regions we cover. One thing's for sure, we'll have a shorter episode next week.
Or maybe we'll spend more time on each game. Who knows?
Maybe.
You got the
Go ahead.
former Mac commissioner. I think he's going to give you his A material.
I
That's
hope
true.
so.
We should have some good material left down in the lower divisions.
Well, that is, you just heard a little preview there. We should have the former commissioner of the MAC conference, Don Kemper, on as our guest next week. You never really know from week to week on this podcast, but that is the plan at the moment. And hopefully he'll still have many MAC teams to talk about next week. But back to Region 16, we had the 11th seed, 7-3 Urbana. They traveled to play Cleves-Taylor down by Cincinnati. The computer said Urbana was a 4-point underdog, and they lost by a little more than that. They were defeated 43-6 in that game.
Oh no! Why do we do this?
Now, you do realize these things do tend to get blown out of proportion a little bit when you're down late. Things snowball in the fourth quarter sometimes. So sometimes the spread looks a little worse than what the game actually was. Sometimes it doesn't. But I did not see this game, so I do not know which is the case here. 4 divisions down, Rebekah, on to Division 5.
Oh, let's go.
Region 18, the matchup we've been anticipating all year long, is finally here. The 2 seed, 11-0 Liberty Center, hosts the 7 seed, 10-1 Liberty Benton.
It's the Liberty Bowl. Which Liberty will come out on top?
Yeah. What can you say about that one?
It's going to be a good game.
Yeah.
We hope so. Last week, Liberty Center was a 42-point favorite over Utica, and they won by more than that, 58-6. Liberty Benton was a 34-point favorite over Fairview Park Fairview, and they won 37-0. So both teams had very good weeks last week. The computer gives the edge in this game to Liberty Center and makes them an 18-point favorite. Quick note here, Liberty Center has an average score of 45-4 in their 11 games with 9 running clocks on the season.
Oh, okay.
Now, Liberty Benton, on the other hand, is only winning by an average score of 37-9. So they're not nearly so dominant.
A disappointment, even, in comparison.
That's very impressive.
That is incredibly impressive.
I would say that I rate Liberty Center's conference, the NWOAL, a tad higher than Liberty Benton's, which is what, the BVC, I think?
Sounds right.
Sounds right, yeah. So I believe the computer when it says Liberty Center's the 18-point favorite. Moving south to the first of our big regions here. Well, it's not that big, but it's bigger. We lost 4 teams in Region 20 last week. Start with the 16 seed, St. Paris Graham. 16 seed doesn't have a lot of hope. They play Jamestown Greenview. They were a 28-point underdog and lost 27-6, so only lost by 21.
Greenview's typically a powerhouse down that way.
And to be honest, that may be one of the best performances by a 16 team in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, hard to do better than that. That's pretty good.
Now, in this region, we also followed the 15 seed, Arcanum. They traveled to 9-1 West Liberty Salem. They were a 34-point underdog, and they lost 41-26. So we lost Arcanum, but West Liberty Salem still alive for us.
Yeah, that's a team that's always here at this point in the year, it feels like. So not surprised to see them here again.
Our next team was number 12, Versailles.
Versailles?
They traveled to 8-2 Indian Lake. The computer liked Versailles by 18 points, but Indian Lake upset them 19-7. Versailles had lost 5 games in a row going into that game, and apparently the slide continued one last week.
Yeah, that was one of the more surprising outcomes I heard from scores around this area that night. Like you said, they lost some games in a row there. You just think Versailles, they're going to get out of the first round, it seems like every year, but not this time.
Not this year. They ran into Indian Lake, and we'll get to talk a little bit more about them in just a second here. We also lost the 10 seed, 6-4 Milton Union. They lost to 7-3 Miami East. This was a toss-up game. Milton Union was a 1-point underdog. They lost 14-6, so another close game. But good news for us, Miami East still on our radar, and we get to talk about them in our next game here. We have a matchup of the 2 seed, 10-1 West Liberty Salem, hosting the 7 seed, 8-3 Miami East. We just mentioned my West Liberty Salem, Miami East games last week. The computer likes West Liberty Salem by 15 points in this matchup over Miami East.
Yeah, and I think I would tend to agree with the computer in this game simply because I think West Liberty Salem's strength of schedule is a lot better. I've seen a lot of Miami East results, and I just think strength of schedule wins out in this game.
I think you're probably right. Both teams, by the way, are riding winning streaks. Miami East is now on a 5-game winning streak. West Liberty Salem has now won 8 games in a row, looking to make it 9 this week. The number 5 seed, 9-2 Indian Lake, fresh off that win over Versailles, they go on the road to play the 4 seed, 10-1 Preble Shawnee. Preble Shawnee first came on my radar a couple of weeks ago when they lost to Ansonia in a game where Ansonia did not throw a pass. The computer says Indian Lake is a 7-point underdog to Preble Shawnee. I have doubt. If
you're not going to back down against Versailles, a MAC team in the first round of the playoffs, and you take them and you beat them, I have faith that you can get by Preble Shawnee.
I would agree. Indian Lake, 6-game winning streak right now, so they're coming in on a high. Preble Shawnee was listed as a 1-point underdog last week against 5-5 Marion Pleasant, but they shut them out 28-0. So a good game for Preble Shawnee last week also.
Like you don't see a 10-1 team or a 9-1 team entering the playoffs be an underdog too often. I don't know if the seed is there either, but I would assume
the 9-1 and we're an underdog to a 5-5 team. Yep.
Yeah.
But they proved the computer wrong. One big.
Yep.
And finally, we have the team I think may be the favorite in this region. The 9 seed, 6-5 Lima Bath is on the road at undefeated 11-0 Jamestown Greenview. We mentioned Greenview earlier. Lima Bath was a 21-point favorite over Carlisle, and they won the game 51-22. That offense of theirs just keeps putting up the points.
Whew.
The computer, by the way, agrees with me and says Lima Bath is a 4-point favorite to take down the top seed.
So Lima Bath is actually a team that I've had firsthand experience watching this year. I saw them play against Celina. The offense was really, really good. I think they're going to probably have to win by shootout in most of these games going forward, but that's exciting to see them be considered the favorite in the region if that's what you think.
I'd have to look, but I believe so. I always had them in Versailles all year long, and Versailles has been dropping off, and so Lima Bath has been looking like it's going to be tight, but they have a very good chance to win this region, I believe.
Like I said, I think with that offense is very good, and I think it probably can hang with or outscore anybody.
Just a couple of extra notes here. Greenview had some impressive wins early over 8-3 Waynesville and 10-1 West Liberty Salem.
Yeah.
But they also have a 22-7 win over 3-7 West Jefferson and a 27-6 win over 3-8 Graham that are much less imposing.
Yeah, and you never know. Could be skill like quarterback out or something like that. I say the 42-14 win over West Liberty looks pretty good.
True. By the way, Bath, if you're looking at this from a gambling perspective, which we try not to, but it kind of seems like it comes up when we talk about how much of a favorite someone is, Bath has equaled or beaten what the computer says the spread was for their last 5 games. So they keep doing a little bit better every week is what that tells me. They're slightly improving as the season goes along. And I like that come playoff time.
Yeah. I would definitely bet on that. Is there a local sports book around or?
I believe I've said before, I certainly hope not, but probably.
I feel like I've seen a Barstool Northwest Ohio Sports.
Maybe.
I think that
it might not be standardized.
Yeah.
Some guy in a corner booth at a bar in Coldwater.
Oh, I'm sure there's local bar betting. I would be surprised if there isn't.
We're moseying down to Division 6 now, Region 22.
Woo!
We had 6 teams there. 3 survive. 3 do not. Our 3 teams that did not survive. 15 seed Paulding were a big underdog, but only lost 21-6 to Bluffton. That was a much closer game than most people thought it would be. The 10 seed Spencerville was at the 7 seed 6-4 Huron. The computer said Huron was a 28-point favorite, and that's kind of how it came out. Huron beat Spencerville 42-7. And finally, we had Defiance Tenora playing 5-5 Cary. The computer said Tenora was a 4-point underdog. I thought the computer was full of it, but Cary won the game by 4 points, 21-17. So that was our 3 unfortunate teams. Now we move on to the 3 games remaining this week. We'll start with those 10-1 Bluffton Pirates hosting 7-4 Huron. We already mentioned how both teams did last week. We have a common game here. Bluffton beat Spencerville 55-7 in week 5, while Huron beat Spencerville 42-7 last week. Fortunately, that doesn't tell me a whole lot. Huron lost their last 3 games of the regular season. Well, that sounds bad, but those 3 teams have a combined record of 28-5, so it's understandable why they lost those games.
Yeah, and they're are they playing D4 schools? Am I seeing that right, or is my eyes just bad?
Looks like sounds right to me, yeah.
Playing up a little bit, losing some good games to some good teams for sure. Toss up for me. I don't know who'd taken that one.
I would have said Bluffton 2 weeks ago. I was not real impressed of how they played against Paulding last week. I don't know.
I know Huron's I feel like they've played some MAC teams and played them like kind of tough in years past. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they ran up against Coldwater, maybe.
I think mostly it's been Coldwater, yes.
I'm pretty sure some of those games were lopsided too for Coldwater, but I think they might have played them kind of tight one year.
Huron is 0-5 in history against MAC teams, but they were all Coldwater. Coldwater beat them 19-7 in 2004, 28-0 in 2005. There's your 60-13 in 2013, and 40-14 in 2014. And then it was a much closer 14-3 result 2 years ago.
I knew one of those was close. Other ones were not.
Yes. Our next game is the 4 seed Patrick Henry, currently 9-2, hosting the 12 seed 6-5 Cary. As we mentioned before, Cary seems better than their 6-5 record would make you believe. Patrick Henry was a 31-point favorite over Evergreen last week, and they won that game by 31 points, 35-4. And yes, I said 4. 2 safeties for Evergreen in that game.
2 safeties. Not a good sign.
Is there a name for that? There's got to be something they call that.
I was just going down the Wikipedia rabbit hole last night, or Sunday night during Sunday Night Football, and found out that Chris Collinsworth invented the term double doink for when a field goal hits off both the upright and the crossbar. Wow. I don't know what double safety would be called.
I've never heard that before.
I was deep down the Wikipedia rabbit hole at that time.
Double doink. I would say there's plenty of words for a double safety game, but they're probably none of them flattering or catchy.
Yes, or else we'd know about it, right?
Yeah.
So it says, this is just a random fact because of Google, the Broncos are the first team since the 2017 Dolphins to record 2 safeties in a game. It was the first time since 1982. Let's see when this article was written. It has happened before.
Did they only score 4 points in the whole game?
Oh, gosh, that was this year. This was written when the Broncos played the Seahawks this year.
September 8th.
Wow. For the first time since before John Elway was the Denver Broncos quarterbacks, the Broncos had 2 safeties in a game.
All right. Did it say what the final score of the game was?
Oh, season
2026.
Okay. So we're still looking for another game with a final score of 4 points. That's why it doesn't have its own. Here's our chance. This is our chance to give it a snappy name.
Yeah.
I have no clue. I have no clue what to call that.
You should make a poll and take votes is get somebody to submit answers.
Hey, that's an idea.
Rebekah, why don't you tell our audience where they can send their suggestions to, Rebekah?
If you have any suggestions or comments about the episodes, or if you'd like to name the concept of scoring 2 safeties in a single game and no other points, you can send them to us by email by sending that to bdmonnin@nktelco.net, or you can tweet them or post them on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Bruce Monnin, or you can drop them in the comments section for this YouTube video, and we will be sure to get to you. Or if you live in the Auglaize County region, you can swing by Bud's Pizza on Wednesday afternoon and tell Dad in person.
It's only 3:30 to 5 o'clock.
That's afternoon.
Yes. However long it takes me to eat my 9-inch double pepperoni and sausage pizza.
It's funny you say that because I got that on deck for me after this podcast tonight.
Ooh.
To a friendly tavern in St. Mary's.
All right.
Make sure you get that in.
Like a plan.
Some good advertising for you.
There you go.
All right.
I
sure
do
we'll
have
make big money on that.
I do have a statistical update.
Okie dokie.
There is only one game in NFL history as of 2024 that has finished with a team scoring a total of 4 points. And that was in 1923. Racine Legion scored 10 points and the Chicago Cardinals scored 4.
What was the guy's name?
Racine Legion?
Racine.
Racine?
You guy's a legend.
That was
Graham.
well.
I think that's a team.
They had one of the teams in women's baseball league in a league of their own.
The Racine Legion football team in the NFL was only in existence for 3 seasons, 22 to 24. But hey, they beat the Chicago Cardinals and forced them to do 2 safeties, so
that's impressive.
They go down in history. Chicago Cardinals is another question.
Yeah. Did they become the Bears or did they leave and the Bears moved on?
They became the Arizona Cardinals.
Which meant they became the St. Louis Cardinals first, right?
Yes. And then they became the Phoenix Cardinals. They were... This is a fun team history. They started in Racine. They were the Racine Cardinals. And then moved to Chicago, then St. Louis, then Phoenix, then Arizona.
And like all major cities, when their professional sports team left, Racine got a new NFL team. Huh?
And then lost it.
Lost 2 teams. Ouch.
Well, they can take We can take ours in Cleveland. Just saying. The Cavs,
Yeah.
Guardians. Sorry, I'm very negative about the Browns right now.
By the
Good
way,
reason.
in case you've forgotten by now, Patrick Henry is a 24-point favorite over Terry. Just so you know.
Oh, yeah. That's what we were talking about.
Now, Terry beat Kenora, as we mentioned, 21-17 last week. The 5 teams that Kerry has lost to have a combined record of 41-13. So don't be overly impressed or unimpressed with that 6-5 record. And our final game in this region, the 6 seed 9-2 Sherwood Fairview travels to the 3 seed 9-1 Toledo Ottawa Hills. Last week, Fairview was a 27-point favorite over Elmore Woodmore, and they won 41-9. Computer says Fairview is a 22-point underdog against Ottawa Hills. I said my first thought of hearing Ottawa Hills was I wouldn't be that scared, but then I looked a little closer. Ottawa Hills has not lost since a week 1, 26-7 loss to 9-2 Gibsonburg.
Okay.
Which sounds like a highly understandable loss. They've won all games since then.
If we're curious about the state rankings, Ottawa Hills is 12th in the Division 6 ranking. So take that for what it's worth.
So fairly well regarded by the voters. Over in Region 23, Mechanicsburg, the 14 seed, traveled to play the 3 seed as a 26-point underdog. They only lost by a touchdown, 28-21. So they put up a good effort, but the season comes to an end for Mechanics.
Oh, that's a bummer.
It is. That's probably a rare first-round upset or loss. I don't know if that's considered upset, but it's probably a rare first-round loss. They've had some good teams in years past.
Yeah, I don't have that data anywhere near me, but I can't imagine they've lost too many first-round playoff games.
I know I made that comment about the Minster state game and the Marion local basketball state game.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the Mechanicsburg-Minster football game, why did I even cover that? Because you were there.
It's a good question.
But that year I remember covering that game, and that was probably...
That was also a very good game. That was, the onside kick overtime?
That was the 2-point conversion in the second overtime, I believe.
Yeah.
That came about an inch short.
One-on-one.
By the way,
that was football's a game. It was that season right there.
Yeah. And by the way, for any of you Mechanicsburg fans out there, yes, I know it was good and the referees messed up. I know that. I don't agree with you, but I know you believe that. So anyway. I've had that discussion with a few Mechanicsburg fans many times in the past.
Yeah, that was a very good season for Minster.
And the reason, and I'm sure the reason Colin was covering that game instead of me was Colin was a full-time reporter and getting paid a salary no matter what. I got paid extra for doing games. So if Colin was available, paper saved money by having Colin cover the game instead of me.
But we all know that you could have outwrote me any day of the week.
Your old boss, Mr. Raspberry, once says he knew what my strengths were, and therefore, whenever someone else is available, they get to cover the games.
I definitely reaped the benefits of your stats, so that was nice.
The stats are always excellent. The article is often written on a template.
There's only so much time, you know.
There is only so much time.
The template may already be written for the game this Friday, by the way. So, in Division 6, Region 24, we had 4 teams, and they were all playing each other last week. So, Coldwater defeated Covington 58-0 last week to end Covington's chances in the playoffs. Coldwater was a 49-point favorite in that game. The 3 seed Anna beat 14 seed Lima Perry. Lima Perry was a 49-point underdog. Anna won that game 61-14. So we were going to get 2 winners no matter what out of those 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the 2 MAC teams, the 2 higher seeded teams, as expected. This week, top seeded 10-1 Coldwater hosts the 8 seed, 7-4 Springfield Northeastern. The computer says Coldwater is not a 49-point favorite this week like they were last week. They are only a 41-point favorite over Springfield Northeastern.
I will actually be at that game this week. And it's kind of a wild card to me. I don't really know what to expect. I've seen Northeastern's body of work. I've seen Coldwater's body of work. I think a lot of teams come into Coldwater and it's a different experience. There's kind of a different, I'm not trying to say this to sound cheesy, but a different aura about Coldwater. And then you see 80 guys across the sideline from you. So it can be a little intimidating. So I think that'll be a one-sided game. At least that's kind of how I'm approaching it as a writer.
Doing my own personal research here, Northeastern had a loss to 10-1 West Liberty Salem, which is nothing to be ashamed of. Their other 3 losses are to teams who are all 7-4 and who all lost their first-round playoff games. So they lost to Urbana, Milford Center Fairbanks, and Mechanicsburg. So yeah, I would think Coldwater would be the big favorite in this game. Our other game features Anna hosting the 11 seed, 5-5 Cincinnati Purcell Marion.
Can't say I've
Anna,
heard much about Purcell Marion.
private school, if I remember right.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Computer says Anna is a 33-point favorite in this game, so you may not hear Purcell Marion much longer.
Yeah, Rockets seem to have it rolling, don't they? Looking pretty good.
Yes, they do. They've really come on.
I watched them play Fort Recovery. I think that would have been second to last week. And, yeah, they scored in a hurry. That's for sure.
I saw them play Minster early in the year and was not overly impressed, to be honest, at that time. So they've really made some strides since then. Like I said, Purcell Marion only has 5 wins. One of them was a 7-point victory over Cincinnati Madeira. So if that tells you anything, Rebekah, to me, that says that's good news for Anna.
Yeah.
Madeira is not a historically powerhouse team in Cincinnati.
On a side note, the first time I ever heard of that school, it would have probably been in the late 90s. They played at the UD district, and I remember going and watching them. Pretty sure they lost, too.
Yeah. Looks like a private Catholic school. East Walnut Hills, East Side. Not too much to say. They've got a lot of athletics options, but not a lot of follow through.
I'm trying to take a guess at the mascot, and I'm coming up blank.
Oh.
Cavalier.
Cavalier.
The Cavaliers.
Cavalier.
Cavalier.
Well, as long as Anna doesn't get a little trouble when they see Cavaliers on the opposite sideline, they should be in good shape, huh?
It's not as fierce as the fighting. What was it again?
The Whippets.
The Whippets.
Poodles.
The Poodles.
Fighting Poodles.
The Mighty Poodles.
It was the Mighty Poodles.
All right. Before we hit Division 7, we're going to do our Team of the Week.
Team of the Week. Ba, ba, ba.
And this week's Team of the Week is Delphi St. John's. They are one of 2 15 seeds to win a playoff game last week as they defeated 2 seed Upper Scioto Valley 28-22. Blue Jays had to come from behind. They outscored Upper Scioto Valley 21-0 in the second half to pull off that upset here in the playoffs. And we'll get a little more detail about Delphi St. John's here in a little bit. So we're going to start with, this was one of our big regions, Rebekah, so that means we lost 5 teams last week out of this region.
Sad to see him go, but happy we won't be doing 18 teams of coverage for the future.
Well, we still have 5 teams remaining afterward.
Good.
Okay, the 5 teams we lost. Number 14, Arlington, lost 21-6 to Gibsonburg. The number 10 seed, Hardin Northern, lost 55-25 to Tiffin Calvert. I believe Van Wright predicted that rather heavily last week in our podcast. A 9 seed, Pandora Gilboa, lost 33-28 to the 8 seed, Lima Central Catholic. Good close game there, as you would hope an 8 versus 9 game would be. The 6 seed, Ada, They were a 4-point favorite and were upset 30-22 by Leipzig in another game called by Mr. Van Wright last week. Van's a big Leipzig fan, at least this year. And finally, we lost Upper Scioto Valley, as we mentioned earlier. They were upset by Delphi St. John. Technically, the computer had Delphi St. John's as a 13-point favorite in that game. So not technically an upset, only by seed, I guess.
They didn't give that 9 wins too much respect, did they?
No, they did not. The computer liked those MAC games a lot better than the Northwest Central Conference.
Well, computer might be onto something.
Every once in a while. That leaves us with 4 games. All 4 games in this region, we have teams we follow in them. The first one, the top seed, undefeated Columbus Grove, up against the 8th seed, Lima Central Catholic. We mentioned LCC's 5-point win over Pandora Gilboa last week. Columbus Grove beat North Baltimore 42-8 in one of those 1 versus 16 games. The computer says Columbus Grove is a 30-point favorite in this game.
That seems reasonable.
Now, these 2 teams just played 2 weeks ago in week 9 of the regular season. That'd be 3 weeks ago, excuse me. That game was also at Columbus Grove, and Columbus Grove only won that game 28-20.
That'll raise your eyebrows a little bit.
Yeah.
This is an interesting matchup. I think you typically see these schools deep in the playoffs every year, so a lot of tradition behind it. That also, just based on my own research, I would side with Columbus Grove in this game, maybe by a little more sizable than, I guess, more comparable to what the computer says in this week.
Oh, okay. Now, if you've been listening, I've been on the LCC bandwagon many times this year. I started wavering a little bit last week, and then after that Pandora Gilboa game, I think I'm jumping off with both feet. I've got Columbus Grove big in this game. So, like I said, they played Columbus Grove really tight before. They also lost 35-0 to Bluffton earlier this year. So, you never know if you're going to get Jekyll or Hyde with LCC, I think.
That wouldn't have been around that same week like Minster and St. Henry played. Would weather have been an issue in that game at all?
No, that was not a Hurricane Week game. So, yeah, I try not to put too much emphasis on Week 6 games because of that. Our next game, Delphi St. John, the 15 seed and our team of the week. They are now 4-7. They are traveling to the 7 seed, 7-4 Tiffin Calvert. We mentioned Tiffin Calvert's win earlier, and Delphi St. John's. The computer says Delphus is a 1-point favorite to upset Tiffin Calvert. So this one sounds like it has the potential to be a good one.
The computer has surprisingly sided with some lower seeded teams in this week. But yeah, I think based on what Delphus has done to this point, beat a higher seeded team last week, playing with some confidence. I think so. What they would have won 3 out of 4 to end the year. Is that right? At this point, I guess 3 out of 4.
That sounds right. I believe so, yeah. I say when you look at Delphus' schedule, you only see the only wins they had in the final 9 weeks of the regular season were against 2-9 Fort Recovery and 1-9 Parkland. That doesn't sound good when you say it that way.
Mm-mm.
But I would always tell people down south, some of these teams up here that go 2-8, 3-7, whatever, could definitely hang with teams down south or elsewhere. So not that surprising.
Nope, they seem to prove it last week. We'll see what happens this week. By the way, last week Tiffin Calvert beat Hardin Northern by 30 points. The team Delphi St. John beat last week, Upper Scioto Valley, beat Hardin Northern by 4 touchdowns in week 9. So that also makes it sound like these ought to be fairly evenly matched squads. Our next game is the 11 seed, 7-4 Leipzig, traveling to the 3 seed, 9-2 Gibsonburg. The computer says Leipzig's an 18-point underdog against Gibsonburg. We have one common opponent for these two teams. Leipzig beat Arlington 20-14 in week 9. Gibsonburg defeated Arlington 21-6 last week. So that seems to slightly favor Gibsonburg to me. So I like them, but I like it to be a lot closer than the 18 points the computer says.
We're not going to channel Van Spirit and say Leipzig can win it out. go all the way. Wasn't he riding hard on the lipstick train?
Yes, he was.
I don't think he's
Maybe
hoping they go all the way.
he's hoping. I mean, I don't think he would pick Lipstick to beat Columbus Grove if they would get there.
Well, no.
But this week, yeah, I think Van would tell you that watch out for Lipstick this week. Or at least say I think they'll do better than the computer says. Will they win? I don't know, but one to watch out for, huh?
One to watch.
Now, our good friend Van was also big on the 12 seed 8-3 Macomb. They travel to face the 4 seed 9-2 Sycamore Mohawk.
Sycamore Mohawk.
Yeah, last week Macomb was a 10-point favorite to upset Eden, and they won it by 14, 28-14. This week, the computer says Mohawk is favored over Macomb, but only by 4 points. Sounds like another good game to me. Let's see. Last week, Mohawk was a 25-point favorite over Edgerton, and they won 49-14, so they had a pretty good week last week.
Pretty good week.
In general, I would say Mohawk has had a fairly weak schedule. They had losses to Tiffin Calvert and the 5-6 Upper Sandusky. But my eyes keep going back to their week 9 win, 27-14 over the 6-5 Cary team we mentioned earlier, who just beat Tenora last week. And I'm thinking if they can beat Cary, this might be a team to watch out for. So I think that's a good game all around, this Macomb Sycamore Mohawk game. And finally, in Division 7, Region 28, we lost 5 teams here in this region last week. However, we still have 7 of the 8 remaining teams are teams that we follow on this podcast. So Region 28 stays very busy for us. We'll go over the teams who bowed out quickly. We had the 19 seed Fort Recovery, who stepped up to play Marion Local, and they lost 68-0. From what I saw on Twitter, it looked like they had a fun time in practice during the week. So hopefully they got some good training in for next season. The 12 seed DeGraff Riverside lost 46-13 to 8-2 Sidney Lehman Catholic. Next, we had the 6 seed 8-2 Ridgemont lost to the 11 seed, which sounds like an upset. They lost to Fort Laramie. Officially, the computer had Ridgemont as a 29-point underdog, and they lost by 27, 49-22. So not an unexpected result there. In a game that Colin said he was at last week, the 10 seed New Bremen lost 13-10 to St. Henry. Any special comments on that New Bremen St. Henry game there, Colin?
That was a very, very good game. Opportunities on both sides to kind of gain distance from the other team. Just a very, very highly contested playoff game, kind of like I expected it to be, and it came down to just a play or two here. And I think that's going to kind of be how it is this week, maybe between St. Henry and Minster, but we'll see.
Yes, I was only able to see St. Henry in week 6 during the Hurricane game. My impression from that game was a very stout defense.
Yes,
they looked pretty good in the good weather too.
They actually, thanks to Josh Link, voice of the Skins, for providing me with this little nugget. But they've held opponents scoreless over the last 3 weeks in the second half of all 3 of those games. 2 of them against New Bremen. So yeah, they seem to be playing with some confidence. Actually, the first play on Saturday or on Friday, I guess New Bremen's very first play, St. Henry kid hit the quarterback pretty hard, caused a fumble. Refs stopped to talk about it for about 5 minutes, and it was just St. Henry people yelling at the officials as they discussed, and everyone was confused. And finally found out at halftime, after they gave the ball back to Bremen and replayed the down, that it was an inadvertent whistle, is what they called it.
Oh.
So yeah, it took about 5 minutes to finally sort out, and it was just chaos on every single side. So weird start to the game.
Yes, nothing upsets the fans at a high school football game more than the old inadvertent whistle. Let's see. Finally, the last team we lost was 7-3 Waynesfield Goshen, the 8th seed, hosted Tri-Village. Our guest last week, Van Wright, said Tri-Village was going to have a hard time figuring out a way to get to Waynesfield from there. Said once they did, he expected them to win easily. And the score was 43-7. So Tri-Village did win easily. So I will assume Van is right on that part. He may be wrong on the part about having a hard time to find Waynesfield. GPS takes care of that sort of thing these days.
It's usually not hard to get anywhere.
But we did agree, it's not like there's a major highway that goes between Tri-Village High School and Waynesfield Goshen. There's just nothing there.
What's that's good for Waynesfield Goshen, though? I mean, I remember how many years ago was it they broke that streak where they hadn't – I think they went 0-10 for how many years in a row? Didn't they? Something like that, and now they're back in the playoffs again, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, they've had a number of very good years the last couple here, so that program is definitely back. Actually, it's 7-3 this year. I believe that's actually down a little bit from the last couple of years. All right, speaking of Tri-Village, this week – their buses get to go to the top seed, 11-0 Marion Local. As we mentioned last week, Marion Local won 68-0. Tri-Village won 43-7. The computer says it's not too worried about Marion Local's chances here. It still has Marion Local as a 49-point favorite, which is where the computer maxes out at, by the way.
Didn't know there was a mercy rule by the computer. So
the computer has a mercy rule. It basically says, well, by then the running clock should be going. It can't really get past 49, can it?
Yeah, well, Marion Local.
Yeah, Charlotte just said Marion Local. I saw the research I did on Tri-Village. I know they've had some good years as of late, but I see last week's win over Waynesfield Goshen was just their second victory over a team with a winning record. I think they lost to Preble Shawnee and Ansonia. I don't think those are bad losses. And I know Ansonia was pretty familiar with Marion. Played Marion that last year. Ansonia did. And I think Tri-Village has played them in years past. I also don't really think any of that stuff matters this year because Marion's just too good. I think she agreed with me.
Well, that's good.
Tri-Village did actually beat New Bremen in the playoffs just in 2021, lost to St. Henry afterwards, and lost to Anna last year. So 1-2 historically against MAC teams for Tri-Village. We'll see if they can even the record this week. The computer does not think so.
If it were any other team, maybe.
Yeah, Marion Local,
much
they
like
don't seem to have changed any.
Yeah, much like every other year we see Marion in the playoffs. It's always possible they win before the final game, but it's never likely, and it's got to be a really, really, really good matchup for that to happen.
Yep.
I just don't think that's this game.
I would tend to agree with you. Our next game is the 2 seed, 9-2 Minster hosting the 7 seed, 7-4 St. Henry. Minster defeated Manchester 75-14 last week.
Oh my gosh. What?
Minster had the subs in the late first quarter already. They actually scored a touchdown in the second quarter with a freshman quarterback on a broken play where he was just trying, I think, to throw it away, and the guy caught it in the back of the end zone. It was kind of like an accidental touchdown. Just one of those games.
Okay.
Manchester pulled two fourth-quarter touchdowns, and one was on a beautiful trick play by them. I'd never seen this before. They brought the wide receiver in motion into the backfield. They hiked the ball. The wide receiver jumped backwards onto the ground. The quarterback jumped backwards onto the ground. The running back jumped backwards onto the ground. And the snap went to the fullback up front, who, while all the defenders were looking where the fumbled ball must be in the backfield, he snuck out of the backfield and went about 40 yards. It was glorious.
Okay.
You should have seen him celebrate afterwards, I tell you. It was fun. So, back to Minster and St. Henry. These two teams played in the mud and wind of week 6, with Minster scoring late to survive 12-7. Of more immediate interest to me, Minster defeated New Bremen 48-14 in week 7. St. Henry beat New Bremen twice in the last 3 weeks by margins of 21-14 and 13-10. It tells me both teams have the defense. Minster maybe has more potential on offense. We'll have to see. The computer says so and makes Minster a 17-point favorite this game.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good playoff football game. Going to be hard hitting. Should be a fun one all around, Bruce. I think Yeah, like you said, Minster probably has the edge, but I think St. Henry is also playing pretty confident defensively right now. And I think it's going to come down to whoever can make more plays.
And in a game like that, I would think there's a good chance it might come down to first one or two series. Minster could come out and score right away and shake that defensive confidence a little bit. That's good for them. If St. Henry can come out and shut Minster down the first couple of series, keep that confidence up, that could be good for St. Henry. So I would say watch the early scores in this game if you want a hint on how it's going to end up.
Definitely.
Our next game, the 4 seed 10-1 Ansonia hosting the 5 seed 9-2 Sidney Lehman. And this is also a game I've been figuring was going to happen eventually along the way. That these teams just seem destined to end up in the 4 and 5 slots. Ansonia beat Twin Valley South 46-8 last week. Lehman beat DeGraff Riverside 46-13. So both teams coming in on a roll. The computer likes the 5 seed, Sidney Lehman, as a 13-point favorite. Let's see why that might be. Both teams played DeGraff Riverside, and Ansonia lost to them 41-32 in week 1, while Lehman beat them 46-13 last week. However, remember that Ansonia game was in week 1, and many things changed after the first week of the season. So the computer says Lehman. My gut is still telling me Ansonia.
I would agree with your gut on that one, Bruce. Yeah, I think that Ansonia lost to Riverside at the beginning of the year. That was kind of a head scratcher to me when I looked through their schedule because Riverside goes 4-7. But either way, they've rebounded to win their last 10. That included a win over Preble Shawnee. I think the Cavs are 9-2 coming into this game. So, yeah, I don't know. I think this is a very confusing game to me. But I think I'd lean toward Ansonia because I'm going to channel my Ryan Day voice here. I think they're a tough team. I think tough tends to win in playoffs. And they showed me that they were tough last year when they went up against Marion. And they held their own in a certain sense. Marion still won big, but I think a lot of those guys are probably back for Ansonia, and they run that different offensive style with the run. And I think they can just control the clock and probably beat Lehman that way.
I tend to agree. I'm feeling Ansonia because I'm thinking they're going to win the line of scrimmage. And our final game in this region, the 11 seed Fort Laramie, coming off that 27-point win over Ridgemont last week. This week they travel to the 3 seed 8-2 Cincinnati College Prep. So a long bus ride for Fort Laramie. 11 seed versus 3 seed, but the computer likes Fort Laramie by 21 points. The computer's like me. It doesn't like small division Cincinnati schools.
No.
Yeah, I think this goes back to that whole toughness in the playoffs wins. I don't think CCP sees teams like Laramie and teams that play up this way too often. So I don't see why Laramie shouldn't be favored by 20 points or whatever it was.
By the way, college prep last week, they won by 13 points, 20-7 against South Charleston Southeastern. So that's how they have arrived at this game. Interesting for Fort Laramie, what a draw. They have avoided MAC opponents for 2 weeks. They are the higher seed, the worst seeded team in both games and are favorite in both games. So they had a very, very favorable draw. Next week, the winner of Minster St. Henry awaits. Minster or St. Henry versus Fort Laramie. Where do you put that game? That sounds like a spot for Sydney or St. Mary's to me.
New Bremen.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Now, here's the problem. If Wapak and St. Mary's are still playing, I doubt they want to host a game.
That's true. I feel like it's happened a lot in years past, though. But I think Wapak stepped up to host a few times, haven't they?
Yeah, I believe they have. So
kind of got like their hand forced almost. I mean, every other place in this area, I feel like has games.
Didn't Greenville? Didn't Greenville put in artificial turf?
I think they started playing games in Greenville last year or year before, didn't they?
So that could be a possibility also. And finally, Rebekah, the 8-man regular season ended last week.
Ooh.
The 4 teams that would be in the playoffs were already decided before the final week of the season. Yep, the last week of the season was just for seeding. So our games are, First, we have the top seed, 9-0 Toledo Christian, hosting the 4 seed, 5-4 Holgate. These two teams played 3 weeks ago. Toledo Christian won that game 62-0. So Toledo Christian really seems to be the class of eight-man football this year.
They are the Marion local, some would say.
Give them another
believe I
couple
remember-
decades to build a dynasty, but they'll get there.
Yes. I remember they won fairly big in that championship game we were at last year at Liberty Center, Rebekah.
So
think they did.
Where did they play that at?
They played it at Liberty Center last year.
The Nippert of
year-
the North.
The Nippert of the North, baby.
The Nick.
They told me this year, I announced on this podcast where they're playing it this year, but I have forgotten already.
Good job.
It's somewhere farther east, like Sandusky or something like that.
Was it a unique spot, or was it just some random field that they found?
They just pick a spot they think is fairly centered and where they might get a lot of fans. Like I said, Liberty Center was a great choice last year. The town of Liberty Center came out big for the game.
Cool.
Mhm.
So where is Liberty? Is that like Columbus area? I feel like I've heard of it or seen it.
Toledo,
Toledo.
Napoleon.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I should know that, having went to Bowling Green.
Probably should, yeah.
Closer to Bowling Green than Toledo.
Fun fact, I did
Yep.
get voted most likely to get lost in Rushi by my senior class.
Oh,
Well,
It's a bad
Rushi is. I do not have this confirmed yet, but I believe Rushi is the only school district in the state of Ohio where the mailing address, the town of the mailing address, does not have a state route going through it.
Wow. Never thought about that before, but yeah, you're right.
and still just the one stoplight.
No. There
Not
was-
even?
I think. Is there one? I don't think. No, not even one.
Ah, dang. I overestimated it.
And I believe the big bar in town just shut down too. So it's a tough
Dang.
year in Rushi, I tell you.
Tough year for Rushi. All right, what's our other game there, Dad?
Our other game in 8-man football, the 2 seed, Sandusky St. Mary, is hosting the 3 seed, 5-3 Southington Chalker. Sandusky St. Mary, 8-1 on the season, by the way. These two teams played each other 4 weeks ago. Sandusky St. Mary won that game 26-14, so expect a much tighter game in the second state semifinal for 8-man football. So that wraps up our preview of the second round of the playoffs. Rebekah already told you earlier in this podcast how you can get a hold of us. However, if you have not already, we would like it very much. So would Charlotte. If you would subscribe to this podcast wherever fine podcasts are downloaded, such as the Apple iTunes Store, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, or on our YouTube channel. And what do you search for, Rebekah?
Oh, Bruce Monnin, computer points, Bruce Monnin's computer points. Any of them will get you there.
That sounds about right. So, before we sign out, anything you need to add, Colin?
I think it's her bedtime. Also, that was the first time I've ever changed a poopy diaper while I did a podcast. So
Hey,
That's a first for us, too. So, as far as we know.
as far as, well,
So, we will return next week with a new special guest to preview the third round playoff game. So long to Charlotte and so long to everybody.